Good afternoon, everyone. I don't know about you, but the music always makes me so happy. It's such a nice way to sort of get ready for Slow Art Friday, get us in the mood and to slow down. Welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and I'm joined by Sarah Reincke, one of our master docents who will lead today's conversation. Each Friday at 12 p.m., while the museum is closed, docents lead virtual interactive conversations about a few works in the museum's collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Sarah will lead us in an interactive conversation about 3 works in our collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each artwork. Sarah will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation about each one with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Sarah, myself, and each other throughout the hour. Just a few things to note before we get started. You probably noticed that as you were logging in that your microphones and video were muted by default. If at any time you'd like to share your video with us and let us see your smiling face, please do so at any time. We recommend to participate in today's program to choose a quiet room and to close the door, to silence any alerts from devices nearby as they can be very distracting and very loud coming through the computer. If you do choose to have on your video, we recommend not sitting in front of a window, lamp, or other strong light source as it affects our ability to be able to see you. Use headphones and microphone for best sound quality. While you can log on using your smartphone, we do recommend using a desktop, laptop, or tablet in order to see the slides and meeting tools on a larger screen. So that we know who we're talking to, just make sure that your screen name includes your last name and your first name and last initial, or your first and last name. During the hour, to make questions or to ask questions or to make comments, you will be able to unmute your microphone when the moderator asks for anybody to make questions, to ask questions or make comments. You can also put any notes, comments, or questions in the chat box. A third way to participate today is to raise your hand in the participant sidebar. When the conversation slows down, if I see any hands up, I will call on you and unmute your microphone. That does tend to be a slower way to participate though, and it might take 5 or 10 minutes for us to get to you since these conversations tend to be pretty lively. So I do recommend, if you feel comfortable, to just unmute your microphone and jump in when you have a comment or a question. We also ask that if you're not actively making a comment or asking a question, that you leave your microphone muted and unmute it when you decide to jump in. We are recording today's program, so if you prefer not to be recorded, just make sure that your video and audio remain muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments that you might have. At this point, before we get started, does anybody have any questions? Gary, I'm glad that you got the login information today. Great to see you. And we'll go ahead and get started. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you decided to join us today. We are going to jump right in and talk about the first piece. And I just want you to look at it closely and let it all sink in for a few seconds before we begin discussion. All right. So what do you see when you look at this picture? First thoughts.
I think the
How did they do that?
Well, let's. I will be making the reveal after we let the picture itself speak to us.
I think the two.
But that's what I'm thinking. How did they do that?
Oh, good.
They look like gravity. The two people there look almost upside down, like they're hanging from gravity. And obviously the geometric figures are standing the right side up. And so they look real and they look geometric.
Okay, so we have some figures that look geometric, and we have two human figures acting with them, interacting
The amount
with
of
them. Go ahead.
the amount of blue is it's all blue, you know. So
And how does that make you feel?
I feel like I'm underwater,
Underwater.
somewhat. Yeah, it feels kind of like water, not so much sky so much, but like there's no other color there besides for the skin color of the two models, but and the white, so it's just blue and white, and that's interesting. But
There's
no other colors.
there's no stability, there's no horizon.
There's no horizon, there's no stability. We see a lot of blue, even with what the humans are wearing. Does anyone else, how does the blue affect other people? Underwater, I think is what Gary said.
We have a couple of interesting comments in the chat box there. Elaine says, 2 people swimming in a sea of robots.
Oh, I like that.
I love that comment. And Betty says, floating in space, lost in stars.
Lost in stars. To what are you referring when you say that, lost in stars?
Betty, if you'd like to unmute your microphone, you're welcome to jump in, or you could put a follow-up comment in the chat box.
I'd like to take a little bit of a closer look, if we can. This is one of the pieces that when you see it in a museum, it really has quite a strong effect. Christy, are you able to zoom in a little bit so that we can see the quote unquote stars?
I'm not actually.
So if you are able, it's very, very difficult, but I think maybe in the lower left-hand corner, they are the most evident. And do those little
dragonflies?
Very good. Yes, they are dragonflies all over the place. And I think that adds, what does that add, or what does it detract from the piece?
Well, it implies it's more air than water.
It implies it's more air than water.
And somewhat cosmic in a sense, and you're overpowered by these little things flying around.
Okay, these are great comments. So it's a little bit overpowering with all of these things, so much on top of one another, a little cosmic because of the twinkling and because of the blue background. What do you think about the mood of the humans?
Confusion.
Wonder.
Confusion.
A sense of awe, like they're like mystified.
Mystified. And who said, Laurel, did you say confusion?
No, I said mystified. I'm not sure who said confusion.
Confusion.
Billy did.
Billy, thank you. Confusion, mystified.
Disorientated.
Pardon me, Gary?
Disorientated.
Disoriented. Yes. And all right, so that's kind of giving us a mood, a feeling. What about, what kind of mood do you think the mosaic mannequins are projecting?
I think they're being protective. It looks like the swimmers, certainly the swimmer on the right, looks like they're young adults or children. I'm not sure. The one on the left looked like it looks, I can't tell if it's a boy or a girl, may be in some type of distress, even though it's swimming in the sky. So it looks as if the quote robots are, in a sense, protecting them, at least watching over them. They're not moving in to help them, but they're there in case they needed some assistance.
Wonderful. So we have kind of a caring mood of the mannequins. They're there if indeed the poor lost humans need some help.
The hand of the middle mannequin is sort of reaching toward the two figures.
Yes.
And the two figures, one definitely is a male on the left, if you take
Yes.
a close up. And I assume it's a female on the left, on the right, just because of the lipstick, but the short hair, it's not clear.
I definitely see a sense of motion, because when you see the drag, even though it's still, the dragonflies and the position of the arms of the humans and the arms of the geometric mannequins, you definitely get a sense of motion going on.
Yes. And the motions, as you say, are not only with the humans, but the mannequins provide us with a sense of motion as well. And the fact that one hand is outreached towards them lends some credibility to what others have been saying about the mannequins are not there as a menace. The mannequins are there as a help if indeed the humans who look a little lost, if they need help, there is help there. So, and what about, how do you feel about the balance of this piece? Do you feel it is balanced or is it off balanced?
I think it's balanced. I don't, I mean, I guess traditionally you don't expect the main subjects to be necessarily in the center of the picture, but of the artwork, but here they are, and that's okay. But they're also, I think it's balanced. The figure on the left is much smaller, but it's balanced by the largest one a little more towards the center, and then the one on the right, the quote robot, gets a little smaller, and then the smaller ones are in the center. So I feel it's balanced, even though there is and I'm sure you've seen videos of the night sky, and everything swirls around as the earth turns. So even though there's motion, other than the swimmers, everything else seems to be stable in an area where other things are moving.
I feel it feels unbalanced. I took a different take on the term balance. I took it to mean not just visually balanced, but the fact that this two people really are standing on the ceiling, and as someone said in one of the earliest comments, it's as if, you know, how did the artist make the picture? And I'm not concerned about how they made the picture, but the effect of how they made the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see the legs there's a reflection in what appears to be ceiling, but probably is floor of the legs of the figures, which sort of cements them to that ceiling. And so there is a sense of imbalance, because I know that it's the other way, but it's really presented upside down. And so that in my head is always keeping me slightly unbalanced.
Just
So
supporting what was just said, also, if you look at the heads of those sort of robot figures or whatever, you can see a shadow at the top of each one, which would kind of support that that's, to me, that's the ground.
I think the glory of, one of the glories of this piece is the fact that its perception, how different people perceive its perspective, is part of what is the artist is achieving. That's what I think that those kinds of discussions are something that the artist would approve, definitely. So if you were to title this, what would you call it?
Blue Room.
Blue Room?
Free fall.
More, I see 3 shades of blue, especially in the main geometric mannequin figure, the second one in from the left, the largest one there. As the more you just kind of stare at it, I'm definitely seeing 3 different shades of blue there, and so blue would be some component of the title, I would say, definitely.
Okay, great, great.
I like the idea of free fall that someone just mentioned.
Free fall.
Yeah,
All right.
that's,
So, okay, I want to kind of get to an explanation of this, but before we go to the explanation, is there anything that we want to add?
If you look at the, I was going to say, if you look at the little teeny figures again up at the top, and I've not seen the piece, so I don't know its scale at all, although I do know the artist makes large scale work, but they do look figurative. And so, and they're walking upside down also, or they're presented upside down.
Yeah.
So that again, sort of places that idea of that possibly being the ground, and also the cosmic quality of it, that maybe that's Earth, or something where that grounds us. But then, as someone said, the free fall, I think Billy said that, and then the fireflies are in what would be sky.
Good, good.
Going
And
back to
Doris?
the
Go ahead, Gary.
going back to the kind of balanced idea, because it's going into a point where that man is standing, your eyes kind of drawn into that, right into the kind of the center, and you can see those 4 figures, and they look very balanced, like the gentleman was saying. But then the figure over the side, the younger, smaller figure, you almost have to kind of look at it individually. You're like, when you look at it, I don't really see the rest of the piece. It's like I see that one figure, and the rest are kind of off to the side. So it feels balanced in one part, but then it feels kind of isolated in another part.
Okay.
As far as
Okay, one more short comment. I want to make sure we get time for the other 2 pieces.
I was just thinking that this may not be too short. The concept, whether it's actually in the sky or in the water, that the 2 younger people are swimming or floating through sky, kind of as we go through life. And then we have these larger figures that protect us as we go through life. These certainly, the quote robots are older than the swimmers or the people going through. So they are our protectors in life that protect us in one way or another.
Excellent, excellent.
Sarah, Billy had her hand up.
Go ahead, Billy.
okay, just very quickly. I don't see this being protective. I don't see it being warm and fuzzy. I see it cold and foreboding. The blue is retreating, and the edges, the figures are made of broken glass. So I have a very different response to seeing this piece. I don't find it protective at all. I find it more frightening.
Well, I love the fact, and I'm sure that the artist loves the fact, that there are so many different interpretations of this piece. And I think that that is one of the things that the artist was hoping to achieve. Christy, if you could put yes. So this is a photograph, and it was done in 2000, called Breathing Glass, which definitely reflects the mosaic mannequins. And it is large. It's 39 by 52. Christy, if you could show those installation pieces. Now, and so many of you were right on. I had a great time looking at this and deciding. So let's first look at the image on the left, because we see the installation. We see that they're upside down. Many of you had gotten that. But look at the picture. I love this. Look at the picture that's to the left of the installation. And the photograph and the installation have been shown together. And it is a study in perspective. So these two swimmers are standing on their feet and bending backwards. If you were to see this in person, I'm just going to give you this description. There were moving parts, and the little fireflies were individually lamped work and mechanically choreographed glass dragonflies amidst itty bitty miniature marshmallows.
Oh.
And Skoglund says, truthfulness is problematic in everything, and the camera is no more guilty of being untruthful than anything else, which I think is a great, great quote. I also want to add that many of you were correct about the humans, the swimmers. This was created in the year 2000, and it is about about how millennials might be apprehensive about their future. And so the ideas where people said that they were swimming or they were floating, they looked a little distressed. All of those comments, I think, were right on. And if the museum opens, although Christy, I think this piece is now gone. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was on view with our opening
Right.
installations, but it will be rotated off, and so we won't see it again for a few years probably.
So I'm at least glad that we got a chance to look at it a little bit more closely and discuss it. And again, this piece is just another example of the more you look at it, the more interesting it becomes.
I always forget about the mini marshmallows, Sarah.
Yeah. So I would I would have loved to have seen the installation and the idea of, and if you do look up any of her other artwork, it's pretty amazing and very colorful. They're all very, very, at least parts of them are very, very colorful. Lots of contrast. And I do want to mention, as far as the millennials and that lost feeling, the broken glass, I think, is a great added element to that feeling. Okay, so shall we go on to the next one? All right, let's just take a peek at this one.
George Billows.
And I'm not sure if you all know how to enlarge. I hope that you know that you can enlarge the picture so that if you do want a better look, there's this little bar about halfway down on the picture, and it will pop up an arrow, and you can make the picture bigger and make the little our visuals, our faces, smaller. But y'all do a great job of really being able to see these pieces, and I appreciate that.
The first thing that strikes me is that it's a room and they're all men, and that what looks to be in a artwork or photograph is a woman.
Yes. And anything else?
It looks to me like the gentleman to the far left seems to be in control or in charge or important, and he may have a cigar poking out of his hand there.
I feel like there's a feeling of satire there. It's like feels satirical or humorous. There's characterizations of the individuals.
And what?
Character chores.
Okay, what makes you say that?
Well, there's this one man whose butt is kind of sticking out, and also some of the faces seem very overly animated, like the gentleman who's all puffed up with the cigar, and the people who are speaking to him. It seems a little bit like a satire. Someone's looking at this picture and being a little bit judgmental of them.
Okay, so we have that the figures kind of represent caricatures. There seems to be some satire along with judginess that is emanating from the piece. Anything else? What do you think the room would sound like?
I think it would be noisy with a lot of conversation going on. From the facial, it looks like the mouths are talking.
So, and lots of different conversations, kind of a noisy room.
Yeah. Your classic smoke-filled room.
Classic smoke-filled room, because I think that I was going to say, what do you think it smells like?
Smells like smoke.
It's like cigars and sweat.
Cigars and sweat. Yeah, that sounds good. And so, does what's the mood? I mean, do people look engaged? Does everybody look engaged?
To me, the figure in the front, sitting on a chair on the right-hand side, this looks, it's got his head down, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going on there.
Well,
He
this
doesn't.
this also is a classic, I think, George Bellows. He likes to show men engaged, doing things, and so this is everything that everyone said. I would agree with.
Mm-hmm.
It's a smoke-filled room with a girl in it.
And so,
don't you wonder what she's wearing?
yeah, well, and I think you can see her knees down there. So the dress does not go to the ground. And is that in accordance with the age, the time period that this lithograph is trying to emanate?
And her hair is a little floozy-ish too.
Mm-hmm.
So
what can we say about the figure that is to the right of that frame? Her hand, and you see maybe
I think it's
she seems to be leaning on the frame. It seems to be leaning on the frame. What does that figure say to you?
I may not be looking at the right figure, but it looks like there's two men holding
it,
the piece of artwork in place, which gives the impression that they just kind of brought it in and they propped it against that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not nailed anything, it's not on display, but it's just there for this observation. And then once these guys are done with it, that piece will leave that room again.
Okay. And
it could be that
go ahead. Was someone going to say something? So do you see other pieces of art in that room?
Yeah, there's one to the left that looks like it might be facing backwards, like it's being taken out or being brought in.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think that they might be doing?
Is it an auction, Bahapi? Maybe?
Is it an auction? Okay. Anything else?
Critique.
well, they could be the critics, or they're there to purchase the item, as someone said, an auction or sale.
Okay.
If you look at the wall to the right and behind, it appears to have a number of very classically framed pieces. So you get the sense by looking at that wall that you're either in a gallery or a museum.
Mm-hmm. Good. And what do you think causes, let's exclude the gentleman who speaks with his hands. What other movement do you see? What makes you, I mean, if you feel that the piece reflects movement, what do you see?
I see the interesting little groups of conversation again. Some people are seated, some are standing, some are bending. But to the right of the two gentlemen with their little rear ends out there you can see this guy sitting, but he's looking up with his mustache. Yeah, and it's just an interesting one looking down, one looking up. So you see little bits of pieces of groups or small groups of people engaging in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I also felt the fella at the far right with his arms crossed. That's almost, we were talking about judgmental earlier. He's really the only one who really shows some sense of strong opinion by that sort of gripping of his arms and crossed and looking down as if he is in judgment or he's in thought that's considered judgment. And obviously then the ones that are very close looking at the picture, they're judging it as well.
So how do you think that this, would the feelings that we have been discussing be different if the media was different?
Oh, absolutely.
So how, and what makes you say that?
Well, if it were in color,
Mm-hmm.
if it was an oil, the gray tones create a, I don't want to say somber because I don't feel that the action, it has, and the reason I said classic George Bell, it's very masculine. It has a very masculine feel to it. I wouldn't feel comfortable as a woman walking into that situation.
And
I like gray. So but the color lends a like a bearing to it.
yes. Anything else about the color choice, the palette?
Yeah, I think the colors would be make it more difficult to look at. There would be a different. I think the way it is now, black and white, makes it simpler to observe what's going on. I mean, my reaction as far as the motion of the room, I think the motion of my eyes is the first thing I do. If I look at it, I would see what are these people looking at, and then I would either go clockwise or counterclockwise. If I go clockwise, I see all the other individuals looking, and if I went counterclockwise, I'd see that distinguished fellow with the cigar. So I think the colors would be very distracting.
Okay.
And,
I agree with you, Morty. I've been taking a photography class over the past couple of months, and I'm finding that more often than not, I'm converting my color photos to black and white because I'm finding that the color detracts and makes them less dramatic, or whatever it was that I was trying to capture, that the color is actually taking away from it. And that the black and white allows you to maybe focus a little more closely on the individuals and this artwork to see their reactions or their stances or their expressions, and to appreciate that a little bit better without that distraction of color.
And I think that may be why so many people like the old movies prior to the existence of Technicolor, because you really are able to concentrate more easily at the actors and the actress and their actions rather than be distracted by colors.
Does anybody remember that Betty Davis movie where she wore the red dress? And there was a big outcry about it at the time, but the movie was in black and white, but everybody thought that they saw a red dress.
Really?
Style.
Yes.
It should have just been red.
Yeah, it was just, they suggested it so much that everybody just visualized it was red, and she went to the debutante ball in a red dress, and it was scandalous. So, and people complained about it afterwards.
Oh my.
It was
Sarah, Barbara P. has a really interesting comment in the chat box. She says, maybe their judgments are also black and white.
Well,
yeah.
and I think judgments can be, and we'll get back to that. So is there a sense of repetitiveness? Are there that adds to this piece?
I think the dress that the men are wearing, the quality of the garments make it a serious event, because they're definitely not casually dressed, and they're all in suits or long coats, and that just gives to the sense that there's an importance of the event going on here.
I think the quality of line it adds to it, that the man with the cigar certainly has a stand-up quality because of the lines all going upward, where rest of the people, it's more curvilinear. But there is a sense of gaiety about the line drawing, or the quality of line, in terms of the playfulness of the shapes around the faces, and then the guy's butt that's in the center.
So, and when we
ahead.
talk about, to build on that, when we talk about like mood, do we see more than what moods? Do we see one mood? Do we see more than one mood?
I see smirks, I see smiles, I see judgment, lots of different moods.
Good. So what would you title this?
Checking out the portrait.
Say what?
Checking out the portrait.
Checking out the portrait.
Men's night out.
Men's night out. All right.
Yeah,
We
that's
girls
what I
always
was
get girls'
supposed to
night out.
Actually, boys' night out.
Boys' night out. All right. Any other suggestions?
The auction that we came up with before,
Okay.
somebody mentioned it anyway.
Portrait auction might be kind of fun, because if you look to the far right, there is a very classic European portrait of a man.
Oh, yeah.
It's in the very upper right-hand corner. And so just to throw out another idea, portrait auction might be.
Okay. And the person that is holding the frame that everyone seems to be viewing, the person on the right, what characteristics do you see in that face in particular?
Disgruntled or mean looking. And also, he's not dressed as Natalie as all the others. He has obviously a short sleeve. I mean, you can see his whole muscular structure, and possibly short sleeves. So he's not a part of the group that's observing.
Yeah, disinterested.
Disinterested. And the others are there for social reasons. Is this person amongst that group?
No.
No. You think that they might be working and not paid enough? So if you could talk to Mr. Bellows, what question, if you had a question, if you had one question you could ask him?
I would expect that each of these caricatures is a real person, so I would want to know who they are. If they were people, names I would recognize.
Okay. Anything else?
Elaine suggested that an apt title might be Boys Club.
Boys Club. I like that. I like that. Is this something that you would like to have in your house?
No.
No?
Well, yeah. Actually, yes.
Oh.
because George Bellows did it, so I'm.
Well,
it would be a great dining room piece. I don't know what the size of it is, but it would be a great dining room piece and conversation maker.
Wonderful, wonderful.
In Detroit, at the men's club there that my husband belonged to when we lived there, they did have Bellows on the wall, Bellows drawing lithographs. So Boys Club probably is correct.
Okay, and you said Detroit, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. He did go to Ohio State, George Bellows did, and was a very nice alumni to that university. And did a lot of paintings and portraits. Christy, if we could have the information. So, you know, it's medium sized. It's not that big. But there are, we covered on some points that are absolutely spot on. It is meant to be satirical. Doris, I believe that you had wondered who the people are. Well, the gentleman on the far right with his hand kind of clutched like this, kind of looking down, is Mr. Bellows. And the very excited man talking with his hands with his legs crossed, that is John Sloan. And the gentleman that is seated in the chair that is looking down and a bit bored is Robert Henry. These three were all in the Ashcan group together. And while Mr. Bellows did do a lot of painting, he made great strides in lithographs and really kind of put them on the market as something that was desirable. He died at 43. His entire career was 20 years, and he was pretty prolific. He had this way of pleasing the art academia while still being avant-garde. And I think that was a hard line for a lot of artists to take, to be accepted by those who were trying to stretch what art is, and to be accepted by those who claim to know what was valuable art-wise. And
what I remember learning is his application of the fundamental of the triangular basis of figures is really demonstrated here, not just from the crossed legs, but from all of the lines. I have to keep my hand down. All of the lines and the groupings of the figures.
Yes. And this was, it's called Artist Judging Works of Art, so we kind of get all that. It most likely is the room is at the National Arts Club, which still exists in the Gramercy Park area in Manhattan. It was established in 1898 and is still going strong. They have a great website. I was just visiting it beforehand. So it is certainly a work that was taken from an actual event or an imagined actual event. And I think that the fact that we had commented on it being judgy is part of the satire that Mr. Bellows is after, because himself included, it's pretty easy to be judgy, particularly about others' work. So, and I think the men's only attitude, the National Arts Club is no longer just for men. Women are now allowed. But I do like the fact that it was taken from, you know, a setting that actually artists and art lovers did visit. So I was interested by that. And
before we move on, Sarah, Morty, I think you had a
Just
comment?
a quick question. Did Bellows have a deformity to his right hand? Because I'm not an artist, but I understand it's very difficult to do hands, whether painting or drawing, and it looks like his hand looks more like a claw.
Right, and I could not find out anything about that. I actually did try when yesterday, but I hadn't found any reference to any disability that he may have had.
Thank you.
So, and I think that we should move on so that we have time for our last piece. So let's look at this one. which is,
We were talking before about the black and white, and I think this artist certainly is using color quite wonderfully. You know, patterns are not easy to put together, and she's got a lot of pattern all the way through, and color.
yeah. And each of the rooms, you know, one was all one color, one was black and white, and then we have this one, which is extraordinarily colorful. So what are we looking at? What do we see?
You've got these impressionistic animal prints.
Animal
And, and interesting, it almost looks in the center as a plant there in a fireplace, perhaps, and the balance left and right of the lamp and perhaps a basket or a window box or plate. So just all of the lines, and it looks a room where you could sit, obviously, with a chair to me and the pillows.
And what sort of patterns do we see?
A lot of animal print.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of geometric.
Geometric animal. And where do you see the geometric?
Well, the geometric's more in, I have to keep my hand down, in the upper right-hand corner is where I see it most predominantly, but it stretches across the entire top of the work. And the bottom of the work has much more organic line in it, with the exception of the cross,
Mm-hmm.
the wicker.
Right.
I would want to sit in that room.
I wouldn't be able to sleep in that room because there's so much going on. It's very intense. I like it too, though.
It is.
It's so interesting to me because it is definitely so flat on one hand. On the other hand, it is very dimensional.
And how do you think that was achieved? What makes it feel dimensional to you?
For me personally,
I think-
go ahead, Kathy.
I was just going to say the shape of the rug pulls your eye to the corner of the sofa and then back, and it almost defines the forward motion of the floor.
The angles, all of the angles of the lines, lead your eye through and around the work.
Good, good. So what about texture? Do you feel that this emanates a sense of texture?
A sense of pattern, for sure.
A sense of pattern.
I don't get, and that's why I said it's flat. If you look at the fireplace and all of that geometric area, it's all very flat. There's no texture there whatsoever. And even the plant is very flat. So I don't get that sense of texture. And as I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at it on my iPad and also on my computer, it's almost as if these chairs, these zebra pieces, are photographs that have been collaged onto a very flat surface.
Hey, I need to make an announcement. It said I just got a flash that my internet is unstable. Let me just check it here for a moment. I don't want to disappear.
You're okay for now, Sarah.
Okay, good.
I get the impression that the texture is implied rather than you don't feel it, but the artist has somehow implied the texture. You can see that there are different textures. They're not like you can feel them, but they're implied by the different things in the room. It's
Right.
Because I see a window and I see a rock and a pillow and a plant, and if you were to tell, with just looking at that, you would expect the plant or the rock or the pillow or the rug or the window to feel a certain way, and that sense of feeling comes through, even though some people have said it kind of looks flat and geometric there.
And what about the beams? What about the wood? There's wood by the window and there's some dimensionality by in back of the fireplace. And so does that wood grain add to how we might see texture or dimension?
Yeah,
I think
there's,
the texture seems to just imply that it could be a real space. It's a collage of possibly a real space. That
Good.
brings a sense of reality to it.
Elaine asks in the chat, what's going on to the left of the fireplace?
Yes. So, and what do we think that might be?
looks like a side of beef.
A side of beef? It's lunchtime, right?
Guilty.
Anything else?
Morty,
I
you
get
have
the-
your hand up.
I get the impression that the artist wanted to break all the rules. Everything is, you got every color in the world, every material in the world. You have crisscross lines, you have curved lines, you have like the geometric stuff in the background. You have some things are flat and smooth, some things are fluffy. It's an amalgamation of just about anything you can imagine in a painting or a collage.
I find it interesting, the left and the right are
Very different.
upside down. And then there's to the far left, to the right of the window there, that piece with that the color and the lamp that it could be. On the right, it's a whole reverse, right?
Yeah.
But they're exactly the same, aren't they? Now we can't see the second ring on the one on the left, but what does that say about functionality? With those two pieces in particular.
Well, the one on the right, it looks like if you turned it upside down, the plate would fall out of the bowl, whereas the one on the left, it'd be impossible unless it were glued to the bowl.
It's actually, it looks like the bowl, the bowl that's holding the plate, the whole thing, if you flip it over, it looks like the bowl is the lampshade.
Mm-hmm.
And and the plate is just, I don't know, some reflection from the light or something on the left side.
Could even look like some flowers. It almost
Some
looks like
flowers. Mm-hmm. But it is the same shape that has a completely different function when it is turned upside down.
And they
Which,
have arrows.
I'm sorry, Barbara, go ahead.
One is pointing up and one is pointing down, so it's kind of an arrow to maybe direct your eye. There are arrows on the bottom and the top.
What was the first thing that your eye was drawn to as you look at this?
For me, it was
zebra
that
print.
rug. Yeah.
For me, it was the rug. Okay, the rug. Anything else?
The leaves in the fireplace.
The leaves in the fireplace.
The wicker.
The wicker.
Mhm.
What about the number 7?
Where's the number?
I thought that was
It's a
looked more like
pillow.
It is. But
Yeah,
that's the first thing that I saw.
oh, it's
Number 7. So in this, it kind of proves, and I love asking that question because I get so many different answers, and it just reminds me of the how art can just be so different with every single person that is looking at it, and it makes these discussions even more important because we get to share all of those perceptions, and they're all correct.
And to the left of the fireplace looks like a gigantic puzzle piece.
Yeah.
A puzzle piece in particular. Yep. You see that? There you go, Christy, right where that little lip was or blurp out. That does look like a little puzzle piece.
A big puzzle piece.
Big.
I think it's also interesting, the pink now I see is both the wall and the floor. because you see the bits of pink peeking out behind the wood and the other geometric. And then now you see the pink is also the floor underneath the rug.
So yes, so we see the pink on a vertical wall and we see the pink on the floor. So if we're looking at the pink, does it look like the other pieces are in front of it? Like does that indicate some depth? What is that? Is it an installation? Because we have the gray with the wood trim on the sides, and then the fireplace. Does the fireplace look like it's leaning forward?
Yes.
Especially if you look along the bottom,
Right.
Or tilting to the left.
tilting.
Tilting forward to the left. Yeah.
Yes.
Look at the number of arrows that there are formed in those angles, from the points on the pillows and the sevens to the fireplace to the whatever the objects are that are hanging the plates. There are a lot of arrows in this, and a lot of right angles.
There are a lot of right angles in this. They're all over. The yellow on the right between the blue and the piece of wood. I mean, there are probably more right angles than anything. Even the floor, like where the rug hits by the by just below the fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was an area of this 58. Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. But as you look at this on your own, and I'm going to hope that you will, there is an area that I could not figure out, which is on one of the zebra couches near the 7, that corner. And I don't.
I think it's a table. I think it's a table, and it's a collage that she's cut out, and
Yeah.
that is a table, a glass table that was a part of the picture that she eliminated
Yeah.
Okay.
when she cut out the shape of the chair.
Think
All
so.
right, well, it's 12:58, so let's go ahead and go to the information about this. We could continue talking forever. So it is a collage. Now, Nicolene is an African-American artist. She is well known for doing portraits of very, very strong African women. So I think that this room does reflect an African animal print, and very strong, a very strong woman. It's nice. It was nice to find out that one of her influences was Carrie Mae Weems, and we, especially the kitchen table, which is a piece that we do have. She said, "It was the first time I saw work by an African-American female artist that reflected myself and called upon a familiarity of family dynamics, sex, and gender." So I was tickled to see that we also had somebody that she admired. The artist's creations, her paintings in particular, are the sum of many cultivated parts. The hard-edged lines, her interest in fashion, have their basis in pop art, and the dynamic patterns and forms recall modern abstractionism. A fun fact, she painted First Lady Michelle Obama's first individual portrait in 2008. And it is exhibited in the National Portrait Gallery.
Wow.
So that is all the time that we have today. Once again, I find that the time goes very, very fast. I hope that you all enjoyed yourself as much as I must say I did. I enjoy these conversations quite a bit. And I hope that you get the opportunity to go outside in that lovely, lovely sunshine today.
Thank you, Sarah. You never quite know what it's going to be like in Western North Carolina. And of course, we we pick our topics and our artworks sometimes a month or more in advance. And today you happen to have a beautiful day, so we want to get out of these interiors and into the sunshine and beautiful spring. Thank you, Sarah, for leading today's conversation. You mentioned that Micheline Thomas, one of her influences is Carrie Mae Weems. And next week, Doris Potash, who is one of our master docents on the call, hello, Doris, she will actually include our photograph by Carrie Mae Weems in her Slow Art Friday next week. Her topic is Women Artists from the Museum's collection. And it's the artists that she chose were in honor of the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, granting the right to vote. So thank you again to Sarah for leading today's conversation, and thank you to all of you, as usual, for your great good humor and great conversation and observations. It really is a highlight of my week. I hope it is a highlight of yours as well. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your Friday. Have a great weekend, and see you next week.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye,
Stay
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Nicely
you.
done, Sarah.
Thanks,
You